The reality is that Bakersfield will be, in the Central Valley, will be the fastest growing, continue to be the fastest growing place in California. And it will be the place where most new Californians actually will live.
Really happy to have you here, Andrae. For all of you who don't know who Andrae is, we have Andrae Gonzales, City Council member for the City of Bakersfield in his third term. So yeah, wanted to give you the floor to kind of introduce yourself a little bit, and we can kind of talk about what you've been experiencing in Bakersfield from your perspective. You're seeing all the projects taking off. I feel like Bakersfield is a city where it's growing very fast, and it's finding, in my outside view, it's finding its own identity, and that's pretty cool. And I'm always for talking about Central Valley cities. I'm from here. I'm from Lindsay, just a little bit up north from where you are, but we're watching and seeing that there's some really cool stuff happening. So I will stop talking and I will give you the floor to just go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's exciting that you're doing this and connecting really all of us in the Valley. That's really awesome to see. Yeah, my name's Andrae Gonzales. I'm a city councilman here in Bakersfield. I was born and raised here in Bakersfield. Went to East Bakersfield High School, and then went off to school, went to UC Berkeley. And then when I graduated, there was nowhere else I wanted to go but right here, back home. And just got started as a community organizer, working with a nonprofit that I started back in the early 2000s. And then I just started working at different nonprofits, ran for Bakersfield City School Board in 2010, and was one of the youngest school board members in history of Bakersfield City School District. 30,000 kids, 40 schools, pretty large district, and I won. Yeah, I won in 2010 and won re-election in 2014, and then in 2016 decided to run for city council because I felt like the urban core of Bakersfield, the most historic parts of the city, over 100 years old, including downtown and various historic neighborhoods, really needed to see reinvestment and really deserved someone who was going to fight for those neighborhoods. And as much as we're expanding out west in Bakersfield and south in Bakersfield, that's our growth pattern here. As much as we're growing out and sprawling outward, we needed an advocate who's going to fight for the urban core and fight for infill development and fight for equity and equitable investment in a lot of our neighborhoods that are considered disadvantaged and underserved and have had a lack of resources for years. And so I ran against an incumbent and won. And so I ran for re-election in 2020, and then most recently last year ran for re-election for my third term. And that's where we are today. I'm in my third term. I still feel young, but I'm getting older. But I'm one of the older people now on the city council. But it feels good because I know that Bakersfield, not only are we changing, but we're growing more and more diverse. And it's really important that our city council really reflects that diversity in all shapes and in ways that you can look at it. And I believe that ultimately what Bakersfield needs at this time, as we continue to face new challenges and new obstacles as it relates to growth, as it relates to becoming a bigger city, we really need leaders, and we really need leaders who have vision for the future of our region. And I'm just feel very honored to be able to provide that vision and to provide some vision for not only the city council, but for the whole city.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Just hearing your journey from really kind of where it took off to now in your third term. There's a reason why constituents want you to come back. And I think it's because they see that you are doing a lot to kind of bring awareness to infill urban revitalization and really reminding people that Bakersfield has a lot of potential, just like all of these Central Valley cities that really started, surprisingly, in a very mixed use way. They all sprung up from railroad tracks, right? All the way from Bakersfield to Stockton, hitting all of these main corridors, right? And I think it's interesting because my hometown is Lindsay, right? It's right between Fresno and Bakersfield, an hour each way. And it has a really nice downtown. It's very pretty, but it's very run down because the way we've developed in North America, but specifically here in the Central Valley, we've developed in a way that isn't sustainable. And I'm not talking about environmental sustainability, even though that's the case. I'm talking more about economic sustainability, right? So there was a reason why there were some railroad tracks, right? And then there were some transit stops, and one was Lindsay, for example. One was Visalia, one was Bakersfield. And around those transit centers and transit stops, you had mixed-use developments where it had ground floor retail living above that. And it really kind of created a heart of a city and a heart where people can engage in commerce. And we don't see that often anymore. The way we're choosing to develop now is you were mentioning kind of spreading out and sprawling. And it's really kind of getting people away from the urban core and spending locally. But the cool thing is that I have seen that there is a revitalization downtown specifically, and you do see it around the city as well as it goes. But the cool thing about that is that you're taking advantage of like the river that goes through Bakersfield, right? That's a jewel of the valley. And you have the Tehachapi Mountains right behind the city, so it's very picturesque. There's a lot of character, and I think that it's great that we have elected leaders in your city where you can remind people that we are living in a place that we design and we choose, and we can always choose to make it better. And we don't have to do things the way they always have been done, because in a lot of ways, those old ways of thinking have failed us. So I'm getting off my soapbox because I love urban planning. I love all this stuff. And I think I get psyched when I see like Fresno and Bakersfield, they're taking off, they're growing. And if you go into like Wikipedia, right, and you type in largest cities of the United States, Fresno and Bakersfield are quickly rising, and they're growing at a faster pace than many American cities. So along those lines, along the growth, what are you noticing about Bakersfield when it comes to growth and the way you're growing? You mentioned it a little bit when it comes to sprawl, but also infill. And what is your hope for Bakersfield, let's say in 20 years? Where do you want to see it?
That's a big question, and I have a lot of thoughts on this topic because as I, represent the urban core, I'm really focused on infill development, focused on redevelopment, whereas a lot of my other colleagues who are representing, wards that are sort of on the periphery are also working on new development projects. And Bakersfield continues to grow. That's what contributes to our growth, is that we have all of this greenfield, and that allows for development to occur. It's far cheaper to do a greenfield project than it is to do an infill project, and it's far cheaper to develop outward than it is to develop upward. And so, whereas you see many cities in California, urban cities are already pretty much landlocked and they're building upward, we still have an opportunity to build out. That is both, I think, a blessing, but it also has some real issues. And the real issues are that every mile that we build outward, that means it's another mile of streets, of roads, of sidewalks, of sewer lines, of water lines, of police and fire stations that have to be built, of parks. So all of these community assets that every community requires, and certainly community members demand, have to be built. And over time, for a city, those community assets also become liabilities, because in time, those sewer lines have to be replaced, those water lines have to be replaced, the sidewalks have to be repaired, the streets have to be repaved, and we have to continue to build more infrastructure like fire stations and parks, and have to maintain those. And the more and more and more you build out, the more liabilities, the more obligations that the city incurs. And so, in the short run, it is such a blessing that we continue to grow. Bakersfield's the 9th largest city. We have over 415,000 people within the city limits. In Metro Bakersfield, meaning areas that are outside the city limits but just adjacent to the city. For example, in Ward 2, My ward goes into East Bakersfield. Most of East Bakersfield is actually in the county. But if you ask the residents, they wouldn't know it. They think that they are part of Bakersfield until it comes time to vote for mayor and comes time to vote for a city council member. And then they're like, well, why aren't those folks on my ballots? Because they live in the county. And so there's an inequity inherent in that as well that we have to get to. And if we included them, we'd actually be probably more like 500,000 people in the city of Bakersfield. So yeah, we're not a small city anymore. We've grown tremendously, about 67% over the last 25 years. And now we have real assets and liabilities that we're responsible for as a city, and that we will continue to be responsible for in the future. So, you asked me about growth and how I feel about it. I know the reality in that, trying to call for urban growth boundaries or trying to curb development is not realistic. That's just not going to happen. If, let's say hypothetically, if the city went that route, the county, which is just adjacent to us, would allow for new development, and it would create this sort of patchwork. If we created some sort of ordinance that inhibited new development, you would see neighboring cities start to permit new housing developments. And so in this region, I think it's very unlikely for us to take such a draconian approach to responding to this growth. Instead, what I've tried to do over the last 8 years is try to promote infill development, try to make it easier and more attractive for developers to come into downtown and to build more housing, to come into East Bakersfield, and to look for new opportunities for us to build affordable housing. And we're working on projects to do more workforce housing so that the people who actually work in downtown can live in downtown. We don't want it to just be all market rate housing. We want it to be a good mix. And so, that's sort of been my approach. And, people ask, well, how do you do that? How do you actually incentivize new development to come into the downtown core? Part of it is, making sure that the conditions are right. So in cities, some of your viewers or listeners may know, but there's a lot of requirements that are placed upon developers when they want to do a project. There's conditions for approval, right? And those conditions can be anything from where you put your trash receptacles to, how you orient your parking or parking requirements, or, making sure that you build out sidewalks and infrastructure. When I first got on the city council, all those things were required, and developers were required to actually study the sewer lines and the storm drains, and require them to do studies to tell the city if their project actually had capacity, or if there was capacity to support their project.
Wow.
That not only takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, and it takes a lot of effort, but all those things kill projects, because again, if you're looking at a developers are, in large part, unless you're talking about affordable housing project, in large part, they have to make a return on their investment, and they have investors. The return rate is far higher, again, on the west side or South Bakersfield when you're looking at a greenfield than it is when you're doing an infill project, because you have to first clear the land, you have to test it, you have to make sure that it's development friendly, you have to make sure that that the project works with all the other uses, and then you have all these additional requirements. We try to move away from all of that. We did a comprehensive sewer study, a comprehensive storm drain study, so that we knew exactly what we were working with in the downtown, and we don't require that for developers as part of their conditions for approval. We got rid of all parking requirements downtown. So parking is no longer a requirement. Parking should be a business decision that any business, commercial business owner or developer has to make based on what they feel their customer base or their tenants will require. That shouldn't be a decision by someone at City Hall who's established some calculation as to what the parking requirements, the number of parking spots are, because that's real money. So we try to make it easier for developers in that way. We've also went in and revitalized lots of our streets. When I got here on the city council, downtown was pockmarked all over the place, all of our streets. And not only is unattractive for vehicles, just aesthetically, it's a sign of wear. It's a sign of decay of a community. So the more that we're able to kind of invest in repaving all of our roads downtown, improving some of the sidewalk infrastructure, that takes those requirements off the backs of the developer. That takes the costs off, and it helps them, pencil these projects a little better. And then we've been working with lots of small business owners, and we created this program called the Economic Opportunity Area Program, where we provide grants for small business owners to come downtown. And we've given anything from $10,000 to $15,000 upward to $200,000 to bring in businesses in downtown. And you have to come and visit sometime, because there are more and more restaurants opening up on 18th and 19th Street. And it's really exciting to see all this new development. One of our most famous restaurants here locally is called Moo Creamery. Wonderful food and has great ice cream. They're actually moving from the west side. They're moving downtown. MoneyWise Financial Group, they're investors and financial advisors. They bought our old historic Woolworth building in downtown Bakersfield, which had the last functioning lunch counter in America, the old Woolworth's lunch counter.
Wow.
They bought it. They're renovating the building. They're bringing back the lunch counter. They have a restaurateur and chef who's an expert, and he's taking that project over. They're actually moving from West Bakersfield. They're moving their offices to downtown Bakersfield, and they're going to be housed right there in the Woolworths building. And so all of these projects are coming together, and it's having this wonderful cumulative impact. Since I've been on the city council, there's been over 130 market rate housing units built in downtown Bakersfield. We have a developer, Sage Equities, that's been really leading the way and showing people what it can mean to do market rate projects in downtown. When in years ago, people said nobody wants to rent downtown. Nobody will pay market rate, prices to live in downtown Bakersfield. All of their units are practically full. People want to live in an urban setting, and we're proving that to be true. Not all Bakersfield residents want to live in a single family residential neighborhood. There's lots of us who want to live in the urban core, and so we need to provide those opportunities. At the same time, we have to make sure that I hear it all the time. We got to make sure that we work towards policies that do not displace people. That the people who are here, who have lived here, who have roots here, are going to stay here. We're not trying to displace people. We're trying to redevelop this community without gentrifying it. And that's a balance. And thankfully, we have so many properties that are unutilized, that are underutilized in downtown and throughout the urban core. It'll take us about 50 years to even get to the heart of that issue, where there might be any risk of someone being displaced. A lot of the development's happening in really underutilized or unutilized properties. So, there's a lot going on, and you really struck a chord with me, because I feel very passionate about this project that we're doing for downtown and for the surrounding neighborhoods, because I know ultimately it will not just be good for downtown and the urban core, it will be good for all of Bakersfield. Because we know that cities are judged by its core, by its downtown. People don't go to, any random chain restaurant and judge a city, right? You can get those chain restaurants anywhere. but you can't get the authentic, Mama Mia Italian restaurant, or 1800, or Mama Roomba's, or Zama, or all these wonderful locally owned restaurants right here in downtown. That's how we will be judged. That's the heart and soul of our city, right here in the downtown, and we have to protect it, and we have to invest in it. We have to make sure that it has a brighter future, and so that's what I've been working towards. But the bigger point too is that it is not just good for downtown; it's good for all of Bakersfield, because financially speaking, we talked about how expensive it was to do, greenfield development for the city in long term. It's far cheaper per capita just to deliver services to citizens in downtown Bakersfield than it is people on the west side, because people are living closer together and it's more efficient to deliver those services.
I love all of that. I'm really glad you said everything you did. I told you I was gonna go on my soapbox earlier, and I'm gonna allow myself one time each episode to just lose my marbles. Okay, so post World War II, that's the baby boomer generation that was coming in. The idea was to really kind of start building single family developments where zoning completely changed, and zoning itself was coined the way we understand it now. So before, you had incredible cities, like alternatives that you don't hear about. You hear a lot about New York, Chicago, LA and stuff, but there were rising cities everywhere. And then whenever we transitioned into this way to develop, where it's just all urban sprawl, right? That took away a lot of the commerce that existed in the middle of the cities, in the central business districts. And what that did was really take away the culture and the way we understand ourselves as residents of a city, where we feel like we have to escape. And we have this idea, this connotation of cities where they're dirty, they're unsafe, they are inefficient, when in actuality, like you were mentioning, people in downtown Bakersfield can experience services at a cheaper rate than those in the periphery of the city. And we need to go back to that idea and the understanding of the core of who we are. All of our cities really started that way. And it wasn't until we had this idea that we had to develop with single family neighborhoods and oceans of just single family zoning with no commerce anywhere in there, except for just Main Street with strip malls and oceans of parking lots as well, right? That really hasn't helped. We're complaining that we have high rates of crime all over the valley and all over California and the nation, right? We're seeing the decay in our cities and the blight, and it's because we're moving away. We're spreading ourselves too thin. And I just wanted to echo what you were saying really quick, where sure, developers come, they build the infrastructure, they put in that initial investment to make all these neighborhoods, right? But it's the taxpayers who have to foot the bill after. They are the ones who are keeping the roads from crumbling and the sewage pipes working, right? And replaced when they need to. They are the ones who are doing it for decades and maybe a century after. And then so if we have this idea of long-term growth and what that means, especially for cities here in the Central Valley, like Bakersfield, that receives incredible amounts of sunlight, rivaling tropical cities, even though the weather is definitely different, there are ways that we can improve our economy. And it's not just about environmentalism. It's about how do we make this economy work so that we're making money while we provide energy, while we provide jobs, while we provide upskilling for people in the Central Valley who are incredible people. And just the last part of my soapbox is that I have this annoyance, I guess, whenever people start talking about the Central Valley like it's the middle of nowhere. No one lives there. We're nobody. It's a horrible place. And those same people, in the same breath, are eating their salads and their fruit and everything that we provide to them, including water, right? So I think it's a mistake to overlook places like Bakersfield because they are the fastest growing cities in the state and in many cases in the country, right? So people need to start thinking differently and understanding these cities as huge areas of potential rather than just old patterns of behavior. We do the same things over and over again and expect different results. That doesn't work. It's awesome seeing that you have the foresight to understand that we need to start thinking about how we grow and how Bakersfield grows, because the reality is, whether anyone likes it or not, Bakersfield is growing into a metropolis. If it already isn't, it is. It is. People are moving there. People like the space. They like the fact that it's livable, and it's still one of the places in California that's affordable relatively, right? Um, and I think it's just interesting to see all the backlash in and the politicization of smart urban growth, because that shouldn't be political. It should not. The reality is that if you build a certain way, it
Yeah.
helps the economy, and that's the goal. It's not about tree huggers this and bigots this. That means nothing when it comes to the fact that our cities are experiencing blight, homelessness, all these issues that the way we develop is exacerbating. It just doesn't work.
And it's expensive on the long term, as I said earlier, and you pointed out and reiterated. And someone has to pay for that. And so where that shows up is it shows up in increased fees for water rates, for sewer. Bakersfield's going through a very controversial issue right now where several of my colleagues voted to send Prop 218 notices to increase our sewer rates from $219 to $950. And people can't afford that. I voted against it, and because I know how hard that is for people, and I know the challenges that people face financially every day already. But that said, we still have major infrastructure issues within the city. We have a sewer treatment plant that's 70 years old and needs to be replaced. Well, those things cost $500 million. And then if we continue to grow at the rate we are, we will have to add capacity to our second sewer treatment plant, which is another several $100 million. And then if we continue to grow beyond that, in 2040, we'll need a third sewer treatment plant. So, these things aren't cheap, and they're not easy, and someone has to pay. All of us end up paying because of that. And so that's what I'm saying is like, I'm not against growth. In many ways we benefit from that. And we do have a housing crisis in this state, and Bakersfield has been a place that has been able to provide additional housing units. And I think that's a positive thing. But at the same time, we have to be smart about how we develop and how we're building neighborhoods. And, I have colleagues in the council who are talking about, this as well, about smart growth as we build out on the south side, on the west side of town, so that, we have some mixed use developments. We have some nodes of little, communities throughout the city. It's not just downtown, but throughout the city. And I think that will serve us all very well in the future. And in fact, it's the only way for us to sustain moving forward. And so, I know that the story that we're going through right now with all these additional, costs and some of the challenges as it relates to growth is not unique to Bakersfield. Cities throughout the country are experiencing similar issues. And so we have to learn from them. We have to learn from their mistakes, and we have to learn from the opportunities that they sought out and some of their successes as well. And that's what I'm hoping to do. That's why I feel like, really at this time, vision matters. Vision matters for our local elected leaders. We need people who have that vision for all, not just Bakersfield, but for all of our valley towns who want to make this community, make their respective cities a better place to live for all people, and who have a vision of the future and can work with heart. It really requires heart. I don't get paid enough to do as much as I do for the city. I mean, we get paid $100 a month, and I represent 60,000 people. This is not a full-time job, and that's another conversation we can have another day. But I do this because I love my city, because I love Bakersfield, and if you love something, you have to fight for it.
Truer words have never been said. That's awesome. I love hearing that. I was really realizing that it's a food town. It really is a food town, and it's good. It's very, very good. Did you know? Well, look at me trying to tell you, did you know about Bakersfield, right? I was about to highlight the fact that Bakersfield has a huge Basque food scene. I think that's
Yes.
really interesting. My family, one side of them have Basque lineage, which is interesting. Other side is Purépecha from Michoacán in Mexico. So shout out to both. But I think it's interesting because that just speaks to the fact that we are an extremely, extremely diverse valley, and Bakersfield is extremely diverse because it really is the meeting place and kind of the frontier between the Central Valley and Southern California. Many people consider Bakersfield Southern California, and the fact that we have and you have the freshest food available pretty much anywhere in this country, at least on the mainland U.S., right? It's awesome because you think of Sacramento being the farm to fork capital of the world. Incredible, yeah, awesome because Sacramento does have it's in the valley, but Bakersfield, Kern County is ginormous. The cropland and the orchards that you all have should be one of the things that draw people to Bakersfield if it doesn't do that already, because you have the freshest food. The same thing as Tulare County and Fresno County, Kings County, right? But Kern County is massive. And the fact that there's so much food being produced, as well as oil and all these things, there's so many resources in your county, and Bakersfield is taking advantage of that. And I think that's what's driving all of the growth. And I wanted to highlight the food because if anyone has heard of Bakersfield or wasn't extremely familiar with the city, you really should start doing that because a lot of your food comes from there. And again, it goes back to the idea that we shouldn't be forgotten because Kern County alone, not including the rest of the Central Valley, is more populous than so many other places. And
Yeah.
it's growing. It continues to grow.
Yeah, I agree. I'm really happy you mentioned that Bakersfield's a foodie town because I represent a ward that really is the epicenter of all of the homegrown iconic restaurants. Everything from Wool Growers, which was a historic Basque restaurant in Old Town Kern, to Luigi's, which is a historic Italian restaurant. The story of Old Town Kern was that in the 1800s, the railroad wanted to build a train station, and Southern Pacific and the city could not agree on a train station in Bakersfield, and so they went a mile away and built a train depot, and that was the city of Sumner. And for almost 100 years until the 1970s, that train depot was actually a passenger depot. And so many people, it's now part of the city of Bakersfield, but so many people, when they immigrated to the United States, when they came to Bakersfield, they first stepped foot on our ground, right there in Old Town Kern, right there at the Sumner Depot. And
awesome.
That was true for the Basques, the Italians, and so many other folks. Even more recently, of course, there's one of the most historic Mexican restaurants, Arizona Cafe in Old Town Kern as well. Interesting story about them. They've been renting a building for 70 years, 50 years in their current location. Just last week, we announced that the family was able to purchase their restaurant. So now they own the restaurant that they've been renting for practically a lifetime. And so that was a really exciting announcement. But it's also a recommitment to that neighborhood that we're trying to revitalize. It's adjacent to downtown. It's not quite in downtown, but it's an area that deserves revitalization as well. And we're pushing for that. We're also, that Sumner Depot we're trying to save. Union Pacific owns it. They actually moved out of it. They were using it as an office. They moved out of it about 3 years ago, and they're ready to demolish the structure. And this was a building that was built in, like I said, 1890s. It's a Richardsonian Romanesque architecture, and there's nothing like it. And if they destroy it, you'll never build it again. We'll never be able to see it again. And so I stepped in, called the vice president of Union Pacific, and said, we have to save this thing. Hold on. And got my colleagues on the council to agree. We got a temporary lease agreement the last 3 years where we've been able to maintain it as a city. And we're working on a plan right now to revitalize it and to bring it into full use so that the public can enjoy it in the future. So we got a lot of work to do on that project, but we're trying to fight for it. But to your point, there's a lot of food here, a lot of food, especially in downtown Bakersfield. And I want to invite all of your listeners and viewers to come to downtown Bakersfield for just one evening, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. It is the only place where you can go to a Tulum-inspired restaurant, have a drink, or go dance on their outdoor patio, and then go right across the street and have wood fire pizza. And if you don't like that, you can go right next door and have sushi. And then you can walk down the street and go to this very historic downtown basement bar. And then you can go just a couple blocks away and go to the best tiki bar between San Francisco and LA. And then you can go down and go to a little speakeasy called the Botanist. But you can do all those things, all those various different experiences, not to mention a honky tonk within blocks of all of that. You can do all those different things in one evening without having to get in your car.
That's
you can
incredible.
park and you can just walk around for 4 hours and have all these types of different moments, different experiences in one evening.
That's incredible. If you're listening to this, don't sleep on Bakersfield. Why? Come on. Look, we're in 2025. It makes no sense why we're going to keep listening to the same things over and over again. Oh, there's nothing to do. Oh, we have to leave the city to really find ourselves and feel something, right? That's not how it is anymore. It just isn't. I've walked down there in downtown. I actually used to work for a company that had a location in downtown Bakersfield, and it was popping. It was awesome. Just the energy. It felt like I wasn't in the Central Valley. And that's a very bittersweet statement because I love the Central Valley. I'm still here. It's my home. But there's things we can do better. There are things we can do better. And Bakersfield seems like it's really kind of spearheading a lot of these things. And it's really focusing on all of that. And, I don't want to make this episode all about downtown. Bakersfield is a huge, huge city. It's sprawling. It's ginormous. So there's huge districts that have their own character and that look a certain way. And it's very nice. It's cool because a lot of the newer developments have a lot of trees. It complements the backdrop of the Tehachapi Mountains. It's nice. It's nice, and I think it's really cool that everyone's kind of being more proud of the fact that they're from Bakersfield, and it doesn't hit the same when people try to make fun of these Central Valley cities because we know better now, and we don't really believe this narrative anymore because we're seeing that we can be happy here, and that in many cases we're happier here than in the Bay or in LA. No shame to them. I was just in LA and I loved it, but we have our own identity. Central California and the San Joaquin Valley specifically are so unique. There's really no place on earth like it. And if we really start seeing the fact that our cities exist in this place that's incredible and world class, our city should be reflecting that. I don't want to go too much into this because this next topic can be an entire podcast episode. And I would want to invite you back to talk about this more in depth, but we have to talk about high-speed rail. 5 minutes. I'm not going to ask you anything about the progress or whatever. Everyone can kind of get that information from the California High-Speed Rail Authority. They probably have the most up-to-date information. A little quick introduction, and then I'll give the floor to you. The California High-Speed Rail is something that voters voted on back in the early 2000s, and it's been taking a while. There's been delays in its construction, and the backbone is through the Central Valley. There is a video that Bill Maher did with Governor Newsom, and he was just like many in Hollywood and many in the coast, talking down to the people of the Central Valley and our region as a whole, which was frustrating to watch. But I did appreciate the fact that Governor Newsom checked in very diplomatically and said, this is not the way we're supposed to do this. And this is why there's so much frustration because it's the fastest growing part of the state. These people who, a lot of the movement to recall Governor Newsom came from the Central Valley, and he was still defending us. I think that's honorable.
I know you're the governor of everyone in the state, and those are... Can you name 3 people who ever wanted to go from Merced to Bakersfield? I mean, I feel like, I'm just saying, it's like...
Let me challenge the premise, because I think in many respects, this goes to, I think, the state of the Democratic Party. And I mean this with respect. The Central Valley in California is one of the fastest growing parts of the state. It's predominantly rural, yes. It's predominantly Republican, yes. But it's an incredibly important part of the state. And I think we, at our own peril, we talk down to people in the Central Valley. And I think a lot of people extend that as part of the problem with the Democratic brand. We talk down to people, we talk past people. I think it's an incredibly important part of the state, not just because I represent the state. By the way, that represented that part of the state, probably the largest share of my recall vote. So I'm not saying that in the context of a political frame, but I am saying it in the context of trying to meet people where they are and respect people. All of us want to be protected. We want to be respected. We want to be connected. And I think they have a right to have this kind of investment.
And to see our leaders do things like that, it makes me feel good that maybe we're finally not being ignored anymore. And we shouldn't be ignored. We should start demanding the fact that we're growing. We need resources. We need infrastructure. And it's no longer a question of should we deserve it. It's a matter of how quickly can we build it here. Again, not giving any specific position on high-speed rail myself, but just wanted to kind of get an idea of what you're thinking when it comes to the urban core, Bakersfield as a whole, and how that would look if the high-speed rail project is completed.
Yeah, so great question. So Bakersfield is a station, and the station will be in downtown Bakersfield. I think high-speed rail in general, I mean, Bill Maher had an easy punchline, and, it's an easy joke. But the reality is that Bakersfield will be, in the Central Valley, will be continue to be the fastest growing place in California. And it will be the place where most new Californians actually will live. And so we have to create the conditions for people to travel the state. And it can't all be through motor vehicle. There's just not enough lane miles. And people say, well, add more lanes. It's just not feasible. And people, say, well, we'll just, add more airplanes and more runways so that you can, get more folks out. But, based on the projections of the population, there's not enough even airspace to meet the demand of future growth. And so if we care about our state economy, if we care about our regional economy, we should be all proponents of high-speed rail because it will benefit Bakersfield. I mean, we will be a big winner. Lots of people will find employment in LA, and they will work there and they'll come back home. We already see that, actually. We already see a line of cars just headed to the Grapevine every morning, and a line of cars coming back home every night. People are more and more are finding employment in LA and living in Bakersfield. You can get there today. It takes about an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes, depending on traffic. Sometimes when you get in traffic, obviously it takes a lot more time. But as more and more people move to this area, and more people move to developments between Bakersfield and the Grapevine, that commute time only gets longer. And the opportunity to find employment and the trade-offs between the employment there and the travel time, the time away from your family, that matters to a lot of people. And so we have to make sure that we're setting our region up for success in the future, like long term, even if it means we're not around when it's finally built. We got to make sure that we do things that are good for this community, this region, in the next 50, 60, 70, 80 years from now.
Will you come back on and do an episode where we just talk about the high-speed rail and go in depth with that?
Sure, absolutely. We'll have to do one in person though, so we can, really get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, speaking of that, we're kind of taking your lead here in Lindsay. So I'm in downtown Lindsay. I have a small office there. I'm, in close partnership with the Chamber of Commerce. They've been really helping me out in growing my business and the media that we produce, right? So I've had so much help, and I'll give those shout outs appropriately, right? So we figured, myself and my company, that it's best that we support downtown revitalization in our hometown. We're nowhere near Bakersfield. Lindsay has maybe 15,000 people. However, it has very good bones, and it's a beautiful, picturesque small city, right?
Oh, beautiful. I visited there like maybe a year and a half ago and just was so impressed with a lot of the architecture and just the bones, just beautiful.
Yeah, yeah. And disclaimer, my aunt, Virginia Loya, she actually runs the VL Friday Night Market, and it draws people every Friday, weather permitting, most of the year. It draws thousands of people to this small city, and it's nonstop. They have bandas from Mexico, and they have performers. There's so many people dancing, and it's genuinely thousands of people. And I think that's a very smart use for an urban core. Of course, there are some little obstacles that come along with it, but that's how a city grows, right? And it just wanted to kind of highlight the fact that we see the energy in our downtown, and we wanted to grow something organically in a way that supports all these businesses. So if we want to go for lunch to Sean's Kitchen, for example, we'll go and we'll get a sandwich from there, and it's literally just across the street, down a block, and then back. And it's nice because I don't have to get in my car. And we can live that in our small cities as well. And we think of small cities as, we have this narrative of what they are, and that's not how it should be. They should be complete economies in and of themselves. They should be self-reliant so that people work in the small city that they choose to live in. Whereas other people might benefit to live in a place like Bakersfield or a place like Chicago or a place like wherever, right? People should have that option. So we're in the process actually of building a rentable podcast studio, and I'm working with some other of my colleagues who have a music studio already done. And this has never happened in Lindsay before, and it's available for the community to use because this creator economy is changing everything. You can start kind of doing what you love, and you can use this creator economy to kind of make things flourish, spread ideas, but also support yourself. And we figured, why not? Why not do something like that? And so far, the community has been so receptive because there's so much energy, and we're just following a wave that's coming in. And it seems like that wave hit you guys first. It hit Bakersfield first, and people were starting to notice that there's so much potential, and it's actually a nice place to live, and it's safe, and it's quiet when it needs to be, but it's fun when it needs to be as well. And we're seeing that trend everywhere. So I guess my question for you, because I know in my view, Lindsay in 2050 is going to be a pretty cool place. So what's Bakersfield in 2050 going to look like in your eyes? And if it's hard to picture for whatever reason, what would you like it to look like and feel like?
Yeah, that's 25 years from now. So my goal on the city council, primary goal, is to create the conditions, and a lot of it I've talked about already, but create those conditions and the opportunities for downtown Bakersfield to be the best downtown between LA and San Francisco. That's what I really want.
Nice.
I want downtown Bakersfield to be known in this state for being an attraction, and I want people to visit. And already, as you pointed out, there's a lot of energy and excitement, but I want it to be a destination for people. I want it to be that place where people think of I want to go hang out in Bakersfield for a night or two, because of all the exciting things that are happening, and we're gonna get there.
I know it. I see the progress, and it's almost like it's exponential. I see a project going on, and the next year there's 3, and the next year there's like 6, and it's like scaffolding everywhere, and I'm thinking, what's going on? Like, what did I miss between last year and this year? There's so much new things and revitalization and of old buildings that are coming back to life. And I like the fact that Bakersfield's keeping its character where it can. And I just see a really bright future for sure.
Yeah, so that's great. Thank you. There's an organization that we started about 6 or 7 years ago called the Hub of Bakersfield, and there we're just promoting urbanism. And we have this group called the Innovation Lab, where it's a 7-week program where we take people through downtown, through surrounding neighborhoods, and we talk about different concepts as it relates to urbanism, and try to really kind of inculcate those values of what it means to do infill development, what it means to really do reinvestment, and why it's so important. And that we just graduated a class of 17 people a few weeks ago, and it was very, very exciting. We also do a field trip some place, and we went to different parts of Orange County, Santa Ana, and Anaheim, and certain areas where we visited some businesses that were doing some exciting projects. So the Hub of Bakersfield, check it out. We have an event called Second Saturday. If your listeners want to come to Bakersfield, I would encourage you to visit the Bakersfield Museum of Art. Wonderful art museum. Has some great shows, and it does some really wonderful things. We also have a wonderful live theater scene here, Ovation Theater, Stars Theater, in downtown Bakersfield. So there's a lot of local entertainment, a lot of great talent here in this region. So follow me on Instagram, Andrae Gonzales, and DM me if you come to visit. Any of your viewers or listeners, DM me, and if I'm free, I'll take you around personally. I'm just so proud of what we're doing. Or if I can't, I'll just give you some recommendations.
I'll make sure to link your socials as well, your Instagram, and let people know where they can find you. Is there a website that people can visit?
You can go to the hubofbakersfield.org and to learn more about the hub. But a lot of my content is really through Instagram primarily.
Yeah, and I do appreciate the fact that you do post pretty frequently, and you let people know what you're doing and where you are and what you're seeing, the progress of whether they're projects or speaking with business owners or residents about a particular issue. And it's nice to see elected leaders do that, because I've tried contacting my elected officials at different levels of government, and it's very hard to get connected with them. I'm lucky that in Lindsay we've had accessible city councils for the last several rounds, and I really appreciate that. So thank you for actually showing up for your constituents and responding. There's been so many times where I've reached to district offices and I'm told one thing, and I know that my message is never going to get across. So I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you letting us know more about the reality of what Bakersfield is and the future that we're seeing unfold. I'm telling you all, if you're listening to this, you really should take Andrae's offer up, because when I would go to Bakersfield, and I still do, it really is incredible. The botanist, oh my God, like I walked in and I felt so not cool. I felt so like out of place, because everyone there was so cool. They were so cool. They were like, they were like dressed to impress. They had pressed shirts with really cool Gen Z pants that are like perfectly baggy, and they had awesome jewelry on. And I was kind of like, oh my God, I'm wearing a polo shirt and this is embarrassing. I'm not trying to dissuade anyone from going. If that's your vibe and you really like these really cool, like it has a sense of character. It has a lot of character in of itself, and the location in downtown is incredible too. So go and frequent these businesses, because when we go and we choose downtown, or we choose a business that we don't typically go to, that's voting. We're voting for our dollars. We're voting with our dollars to make sure that we support the kind of businesses that we want to see. So thank you again. Thank you for joining. I would love to have you back on. Maybe we can do like a quarterly update about Bakersfield or something. And absolutely. And I know my audience is going to have an amazing time hearing about this and seeing how Bakersfield really has come up. It's not a matter of, it's coming up. It's already there. And it's awesome. So thank you again.
And thank you for doing what you're doing and spreading the word and helping all of us learn about each other more, and informing us on different concepts as it relates to growth and development. I think it's really important for all of us to, not only do the work, but also take time to talk about the work and reflect on it, and reflect on these moments and these experiences and where we are in this particular time in history. And there's a lot going on at the national level that is, really sometimes very overwhelming and hard to understand, and definitely hard to digest. But it's very empowering to think about the work that all of us can do, whether we're elected office or not, at the local level, to really shape the future of our community, not just for ourselves and for our families, but for the future, for future families. And it's really exciting to think about, how much we can do that's positive for the future.